Marvel is about to walk into Hall H and tell us about what's next. But this last phase has shown that they're struggling to find characters that audiences really resonate with. Here are four things that I think Marvel has to fix after Doomsday. The first is to actually invest in its characters. What we saw kind of in the last phase is that there were a ton of character introductions, like Shang-Chi, Miss Marvel, like the Fantastic Four came out. And I really felt like, for even the internals, even though no one remembers those guys, one of the things that really happened in this phase is that even though Marvel introduced the characters, it didn't have the confidence to follow up on them. Shang-Chi has literally not had a movie since its first movie and is now just appearing in Doomsday. Um, on another kind of subject similar to that, Miss Marvel, who I think is one of the most interesting characters to come out in the last 20 years for Marvel, only got a TV show, kind of came in like a mediocre Marvel's movie, and then didn't really get her own spotlight. Actually, I also just remembered Moon Knight. How could we forget Oscar Isaac literally playing Moon Knight exceptionally well? The series did amazing, and we literally have not heard of him since. And so Marvel needs to kind of go back to what worked in phase one, which is we had Iron Man 1 and Iron Man 2 quickly after. And then soon after that, the Avengers to really build out that character. The same is true for Captain America. The same is actually true for Thor. And in a way, even though, Thor 2 wasn't a hit, maybe Captain America 1 wasn't the most popular movie, Marvel had the confidence to stick with each character because it knew that it was building something that fans were going to flock to. And I think this is the key for the next phase. Marvel needs to stop just making up projects that make money. They need to focus on what are the characters that audiences can grow to love. Maybe it's not in the first movie. Maybe it's not in the first TV show. But if you continually just drop characters after you introduce them, you're not creating those hype moments later on because the characters aren't people that audiences actually have connections to. There are a lot of opportunities for Marvel to actually start investing in its characters again and a smaller set of characters rather than trying to, continuously greenlight new projects and new characters. The second point in this new phase, the movies need to be the center of the Marvel Cinematic Universe again. And I think this point has already been said multiple times. There's way too many Disney Plus shows. But the thing that I think is the worst part about these Disney Plus shows is that a lot of them took what were probably the most interesting stories in the previous phase and turned them into mediocre shows. I actually think that the Falcon and Winter Soldier storyline, for example, would have been a really great Sam Wilson movie. I think he grapples with a lot of what it means to be Captain America in that series. And yet, because it was on Disney Plus, no one saw it. And then by the time we saw Brave New World, Sam Wilson was just not compelling as a character. I think the solution here is really simple. Go back to making the movies the center and the central storyline of the next phase of the universe, whether that is X-Men, whether that is Secret Wars, whatever that's going to be in this next phase. Each movie should have something that actually builds into the shared universe that the audiences can follow, because otherwise, if you start building the shared universe outside the movies, the general audiences just are not going to follow what Marvel is doing. And so the TV series can be interesting as maybe fan explorations or something else that I'll just talk about. But I really don't think that you need to put, even character introductions or interesting things about characters introduced in the TV series. Now, this third point that I think is more so about the Marvel brand, but I think Marvel as a whole and Marvel Studios should invest outside the MCU to actually invest in the characters in the MCU. Let me explain what that means. So, a great example of this is DC. So in DC, obviously there is the cinematic, Robert Pattinson Batman currently before it was the Nolan Batman, but continuously DC has always been able to kind of build interest in Batman as a character by having different levels of experimentation. They had Batman Ninja, which was more animated. They had Batman Beyond, which was a completely different take on Batman. Lego Batman, which also just reinforces the Batman IP and franchise. I think Marvel needs to go back to building almost its characters as a brand and then trying to experiment within that character and not just the universe. As an example, like we're having the X-Men series alongside what's probably going to be a future X-Men MCU movies. Now, I would really like Marvel to not try to unify those two brands. I would have the Marvel Cinematic MCU X-Men. I would also try to experiment with what does it look like to have an anime version of the X-Men? What does it look like to have short films about the X-Men? What does it look like to have social media videos about the X-Men? There's so many different ways and experimentation and creative things that you can do with just the characters. And a lot of the times, like taking a more creative swing has been shown to be more interesting for the character. I mean, just look at the Spider-Verse movies. Like they took a completely different approach to how they're approaching Spider-Verse, Miles Morales, how they are adapting a lot of those characters, and it worked out amazingly for that character. And now Miles, who has appeared in the animated series and now the Insomniac Spider-Man games, the MCU basically needs to take the same approach. Rather than committing to one vision of the character, think about the character almost as a holistic brand that you can build the MCU around such that you have more things that the audience is better interested in. And then finally, the last thing about the MCU that I think that has been really struggling to find its footing on, especially in this last series of movies, is that the MCU really needs to find a thematic backbone. What exactly are these movies trying to be about, and what do each of these heroes actually represent? And actually, I think one of the best examples of the audience being challenged by the themes of an MCU movie is in Infinity War and Endgame. There's so many interesting themes to explore about what does it mean to be sacrificial versus not. And I think in this most recent kind of series, they've done a little bit of it, but a lot of the major hits, like the worst offender of this is Captain America Brave New World. That movie, I don't really know if it actually had anything to say. It really was just made to talk about Sam Wilson, but then it wasn't clear what exactly Sam represents. What does it mean, the Red Hulk? What does the Red Hulk represent? Why should we care about Sam? What are his beliefs as a hero? And I think this kind of interest and intrigue in the characters and the themes themselves is implicitly what brings people to the theater. Like people are going to go watch Spider-Man next week because they know what Peter Parker and Spider-Man represent. Spider-Man represents self-sacrifice, heroism, defying the odds, doing things that no one else would do while putting yourself on the line, even if it's the riskiest thing that you can do. And that is the reason why those tickets sold out almost immediately whenever anything Spider-Man comes up. I think in the future, Marvel really needs to take that approach about what does our character actually represent, and can we bring that to the screen rather than kind of just putting stuff together, basically, quote unquote, playing with action figures, the way that I feel like they're starting to lean towards with some of these movies. So, in summary, really the thing that I think Marvel needs most is just centralizing a lot of their characters, putting a coherent theme onto what they're doing, um, limiting and building their focus around characters again, using kind of TV shows and different mediums not as extensions of the universe that are confusing, but rather as ways to experiment with different characters. And finally, thinking about what do they actually represent as a brand? What do they mean to us as viewers? Because I want the Marvel Cinematic Universe to succeed. I want to be there on opening night of every Avengers movie, feeling that level of hype that I've had since Avengers 1 all the way to Endgame. And I'm really concerned that the brand is going in a direction that I think is going to hurt it in future installments. And so, which character has Marvel introduced that you actually want to commit to? Let me know.